Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm joined today by Scott Allen, our Senior Designer. So today we've got a couple of things that I want to go through. We're going to be talking today about the different component types. We spend an awful lot of time here talking about the UX component, but there are other types. So we're actually going to talk about everything but the UX component today. And even then, we'll probably still end up talking about the UX component. I'm also here to answer your questions, and we got several questions in already, so I'll be happy to tackle those. If you do have more questions, you can either type them into the chat window of the GoToWebinar control panel, or you can send them to us here at guides, Guides, at alphasoftware.com, and we'll be happy to get back to you with an answer. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and you should see Alpha Anywhere. And Scott, if you could confirm that, that would be great. Just want to make sure everything's coming through.
I see your Alpha Anywhere screen.
Fantastic. All right. So in many presentations that we've done before, we've had you go up here to the new button and say, I want to create a new type of web component. And here we go. I'm here in the Web Projects Control panel, and I'm going to choose New Web Component, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of different types of components. Starting here with these legacy components, these are components that may have been used in an earlier project, but we absolutely do not recommend you using them going forward in terms of building new projects. They tend to use DBFs as their data source, and they have older technologies in it that just don't work as well, especially many of them don't work at all in a mobile environment. So up here are the ones that we suggest that you use. And of them, even a few of these have had some of their functionality not usurped, but let's just say copied and brought into that UX component that's so popular. Let's talk about some of the ones that we'll just go ahead through the different component types and talk about the ones that might still be of use to you. We'll begin here with the app launcher. Now the app launcher's job, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on it. The app launcher's job was to figure out what type of device the application is run on, and then have it automatically launch a different component based on that device. So for example, you may have had a component that you designed for mobile. Let's say you had big buttons on it, you had fewer fields, and it was just a completely different design than what you have done for your desktop application. The desktop application might have quite a few more controls. Maybe they're not broken down into pages the way you might do on an iPhone. Maybe you use more of a traditional menuing system up at the top, kind of like what we have up here in Alpha Anywhere, as opposed to using the hamburger menu that you might use in a web application. More and more people are in fact not using this app launcher component, and they're building that functionality into the UX itself, because the UX is also smart enough to do what we call media queries, the ability to look up and ask the browser, what kind of browser are you? Are you running on Android? Are you running on iPhone? Are you running on a Mac? Are you running on a PC? Are you on a tablet? And then the screen can be adjusted as well. And we also feature a lot of responsive design elements in Alpha Anywhere's UX component, which mean that it's not as necessary to design different components for different types. But if you want to have a very different experience, say from the iPhone to a desktop browser, the app launcher might be just the thing. So that's what this component is all about. Another component that I started playing around with, let's go ahead and hit new, is the image gallery. The image gallery is kind of cool, actually. In order to use the image gallery, so the image gallery basically creates a carousel-like effect that lets you view images that you have in a particular folder. So I've gone ahead and created a new image gallery here. And in here in properties is where you set up almost everything for the image gallery. It has a default image directory of images, and that's what we have it set to here. And we've even included some default images so that you can open one of these up and play with it right away without having to supply your own images. but of course you can supply your own images because that's the point of this application. You can also bind those to a database so that you can pull up information and things like that about a particular image and have it display on the screen. There's quite a few nice little things that you can do. I'm going to choose just this really simple case where I'm going to use the default as images, and I'm just going to go ahead into live preview. Now, at this point, if you try this yourself, you may get two warnings that will appear. They shouldn't appear for me, and I'll tell you about those warnings in a second and what you'll do about them. Okay, so I've opened this up here, and you'll see here are some predefined images. They were actually taken by Bob Moore, our VP of Mobility, sort of a photographer there on the side. It's got left and right buttons. It lets you, I think, click on a particular image and blow it up. And you can go back and see other images like that. It's a neat little control. You can imagine if you were building an app for showing off real estate or something like that, or products for sale, this might be a fun little component to use that to go ahead and put on a page. And as you see, all you do is point it to a directory, so it doesn't take an awful lot of work to set it up. However, it is powered by JavaScript, and the JavaScript library is not automatically included when you publish it, but it is included in Alpha Anywhere, and it can be added to the JavaScript libraries that you include. And you'll do that up here in Project Properties. And so there are two things that you'll do here. One is, I think this is where you do this one, include the library for, let me find, sorry, image. Okay. You're going to go into Web Project Properties. You only need to do this once for the project. So if you have multiple image gallery components, you only have to set this up once. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to do a find for image, include image gallery, and you're going to check that box. The second thing is that the version of jQuery that we supply can conflict with a version of jQuery that is expected. jQuery is another JavaScript library that helps you display things on the screen. And to do that, you just go into jQuery, you look that one up, and you can say, by default, it's going to say that this jQuery core is loaded from the internal version, whatever is alpha. What you're going to want to do instead is you're going to want to set to load from Google. It's going to put a version here. You're going to want to erase that. And you're going to do the same thing for jQuery UI. You're going to say load from Google and then erase it. And once that's done, you're good to go and ready to start using that component. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of here because that's good to go. Now, you don't have to go back and look at this video to remember what those are. It's actually nice enough to tell you that in dialog boxes once you start using the image gallery component. But it's something I just wanted to show you just so that you'll be aware that it's there. Okay, another component that we could take a look at is the video player component. So let me go ahead and say new component. And we're going to go to video player. And in the video player component, again, the properties are what drives it here. Now, video player is sort of interesting. It was built a while ago. It still functions, though, even though it's older code. And it gives you a couple of options for what type of video player. Now, often I want to use one that's not YouTube, so I'm going to choose one to play my own files, maybe off my server. So to do that, instead of using the YouTube video player, I'm going to go to this dropdown, and I'm going to choose this one called HTML5/video player. So once I've done that, now I have a whole bunch of other options. What are the videos that I want to display? What's the thumbnail going to look like on the player? And a bunch of other things. One thing, and again, we do give you another sample in this case so that you can try it out right out of the box without having to supply your own videos and images, just as an example. Now, the video player priority, I'm not sure what this is set to as default, but you're going to have two choices here. One is going to be the Flash video player, and the other is the HTML5 video player. The one you're going to want to use is the HTML5 video player because Flash on almost every system has been deprecated and is no longer suggested for use anymore. So unless it was being run on very old machines or something, there probably is no good reason why you would ever want to select Flash. Now keep in mind, this is just priority. So it's possible that even if you selected this one, it would still work because it's supposed to figure out whether or not you have Flash available. But you know what? You can just do yourself a favor and just go ahead and set it to HTML5 video player from there and see how that works. So now that that's there, let's go ahead and just do a live preview. Not sure if it works in working preview. I didn't try it. And there enough is the background image there, and sure enough, it has this little video complete with audio. You're probably not hearing the audio. I am right here in the background. And again, you can trade that out. There are, if you go into overview, it's going to tell you about the different JavaScript methods. What's cool about that is that you can get it to control the video player, get it to stop. I think you can load in the correct video and things like that. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can do here with JavaScript in this video player component. Again, video players and images are also supported directly in the UX, but these are kind of fun because they're much easier to set up. And probably be a good choice in many circumstances. They're both image and video are meant to work in a mobile environment, so those will work for you. Let me go ahead and close out of this. And I'm going to go new, and let's see if there's anything else I want to tell you about components here today. Okay, the maintenance component you are not going to use. That's for maintaining DBF tables. Hopefully none of you are using those anymore. If you do, you can still add it. It lets you pack and reindex your DBFs to keep them running. Again, I wouldn't use that. There's a login component. We talk about this as part of the security system. Although we do recommend now that the login component, yes, as you can imagine, be used by the UX. In fact, when you is to do the UX version of the login component as opposed to building a login component that is separate. If you choose login component, it's going to remind you of that fact. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and click next. And it's going to say, what kind do you want? Do you want to use the legacy one? And that was the one that we had selected. Or, and this is the default, you want to create a login component using the UX component. And this is really the one that you're going to want to choose. Okay, there's no real good reason to go back to using that legacy component anymore. And also the UX one gives you functionality that you don't have in the other ones, such as two-factor authentication and other things. Navigation system. This was kind of interesting. We used to have, well, still do, a component that could hang out on the top of a web page and allow you to have horizontal and vertical drop-down menus that would take you to specific pages in your application. We highly recommend that instead of using this system, you instead use the UX, which also has got a control bar builder, but it's even more advanced than the navigation system one. So that's what you'd want to use there. So I don't recommend for new projects using the navigation system component. Just use the one that's built into the UX. Custom component, that's sort of a more advanced component. For example, when Bob, our VP of Mobility, built out our video player and our image gallery, he actually did that using a custom component. So if you've got some skill with XBasic and an idea for a kind of component that we hadn't thought of, one that's maybe specific to your needs, you can actually build this out, but it's much more of an advanced process, as you might imagine. Next up, there's the page layout builder, which simply says that you can build a complex page layout. I would suggest, again, not using this particular component and going over to the UX and dividing things up into panels and panel layouts and panel navigators. That's really the way to do it. So if you take a look through the documentation on the paneling system, and I want to do actually a separate session just on panels, that would be a very good one to do. And now we've got two more here, excluding the UX. We've got the tabbed UI builder. This is a cool feature, but I would suggest, in fact, it really only works very well if you're using it in a desktop web interface, which is why it's beginning to lose some popularity, because you can build something like this in, as you guessed it, the UX. But this is a really, really simple way to build an interface that's got sort of a pseudo menuing system. So with the tabbed UI builder, what I do is I open up a new tab UI builder and I start adding buttons to it. And so I can have it open all these different kinds of things. So one of which is a component, which is kind of cool. And I've got a component called SSN example, which I'm going to show you in a second. And I've got a component called, I thought I had one called run XBasic. I do, there it is. And so now if I just do a quick working preview, what I get is I have an interface that's already built. In fact, it's reminding me I can enter header text here. And if I want to go to one of my components, let's say the SSN example, it's now a tab here. Now you can adjust the way that these tabs work by adjusting the style and the style tweaks in the designer. When I click this other one, I'm going to this other component. Now I've got this other component, and each of them have got an X, so I can close them. I believe that each time you open this, yeah, okay. So when you open it, it'll pop over to the one that's already existing, and you can just close them like that. So that's a really, really simple way of building a menu system to open up different pages. So maybe you have like an administrator interface, for example, where you want to see users, and then you want to see roles, and then you want to see pages that they can access, and then you want to see reports, and you want to see documentation. You could put all of those here in a menu like that. And I think, in fact, I'm almost positive it does support the security systems, so you can hide things that certain users aren't allowed to see. So in the case of the administrator, for example, the administrator might be able to see different buttons and tabs that a regular logged in user would not be able to see, a regular end user. So that's the tabbed UI builder. If the stuff you're building is for web only, this is really cool shortcut to get up and running. So even though, yes, you can build it out in the UX, a lot of people still prefer to use this. If what you're building you think you may want to bring to mobile someday, don't use the tabbed UI builder. Instead, build it out in the UX. And we have some videos showing how that was done. All right, the last one I want to show you, last but certainly not least, is the grid component. Now, the grid component, again, is only really for desktop web. It doesn't work well at all on a mobile device. But what it lets you do is it lets you really quickly connect up to a SQL data source. So in this case, let's say I just want to take a look at I've got a database that's already been set up, and I want to take a look at some of the data in some of the tables. So I have a couple choices when I first start this kind of component. It asks if I want to start with a template, and these are actually very helpful. So for example, if you want to create just a simple submit form that writes back to a SQL database, you could choose this one, enter record form, and it just has one instance and which they can fill out, and it will save back into the database. If you want one that's read only, just display stuff in here. Maybe you're showing a phone directory or something like that, or sorry, email directory, staff directory, something like that. That would be good. This one lets you have full access to all the data. In fact, let's go ahead and choose that one. And here is some help that it brings up at the beginning, and it tells you basically how it's been set up to begin with. And these correspond to settings that you'll find over here in the left pane. To begin building a grid, you first go into the design tab, and you select the data source that you're going to use. So that's right. Whoops. So data source, so you're almost always going to use a SQL database. You may not have the option if you're using Community Edition. Once that's selected, you can go ahead and create a connection string or use a connection string. In this particular project, I don't have any connection strings, so I'm going to go ahead and set one up. And we'll set one up using our popular Northwind's database. Just going to click OK, and this is just going to go ahead and make a clean copy. And now it's created a connection string to a database that we can now use in our project. So I'm going to select this one, close, select, and there is my connection string. Once I click the connect button, I'm now going to be allowed to see the tables that are in that database. And so we almost always use customers. So why break tradition now? Let's go into customers and choose that. And define arguments. This can be used if I wanted to filter on particular customers or allow the user to filter on them. And you can use those arguments here. I'm not going to get into that right now. And then we're going to pop over here to fields. So in other words, what fields do we want to display in the grid? So let's go with company name, city, and country. So if we put those in place, we're going to go and let's take a look at working preview. Oh, I didn't put any fields in the detail part. Okay, so this is the grid part. The grid part is divided into two parts. When you've got a detail view, it has a sort of a drill down area where you can actually fill out more information. So I'm going to add this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. All right, oops. And I think that's all I need to do at this point. It's been a little while since I've set one of these guys up. Does not include the primary key. Data source needs to include the primary key because I'm doing an update. So I'm going to go back in here, query, select tables, and I need to tell it that the primary key, shoot, I know I had that one. Oh, primary key, duh, it's right down here, select primary key. And I'm going to choose customer ID as the primary key. Okay, so that should be all set. I don't know that I need to specify it for the detail view too, but we'll see. Does not include all of the primary key columns. Oh, my bad. Let's go back into fields, customer ID. And now that that's included, I think we'll be okay. Nope, I gotta put in fields too. Okay. Okay, quick note, and something that I had forgotten, that you do need to have your primary key for the table. If it's going to be updatable, you're going to need to have the primary key for the table in both the grid and in the detail view. And that looks like it may have done the trick. Excellent. So here, if I click on a particular record, you'll see that I just have the fields that I include in the list view, or sorry, in the grid view. And then here's the detail view with the ones that I created here. I can enter a new record here. I can update. I can delete records. I can save records and so on. So that's all built in here. And yes, you can change the style of these, and you can put the detail view on into a different container. You can put it up here to the right and things like that. But it's a nice, really, really quick way of just building a quick interface to a table. Now, just one more thing I want to show you in Grid Builder. Since we did have the customer ID here, it might not be something that you actually want to display, so you can actually hide that. I believe it's just a hidden hide row. And then if I do that up here in fields, hide row, hide column, sorry. They're still included, so I shouldn't get that warning, but whoops, there we go. Yeah, they're still included, so we wouldn't get the warning, but we're also not going to show you a field that you really didn't need to see. You really didn't need to see the primary key. In many cases, it's a GUI anyway, which is kind of messy, so you don't want to look at that. All right, so I'm going to close out of here, and that's about as far as I wanted to go today with components. I do have some questions, though, to answer, but let me see if there have been some questions that have been raised during today's session. Okay. I see. Is there a way to force Alpha to open web pages in Edge instead of IE? I think there is, but I need to look that one up. Thank you for the question. I will make sure I get back to you. Someone would like to look at test databases. I can do that in another session. Yeah, someone asked, did we ever do a video on replacing the tabbed UI with the UX replacement of the tabbed UI? I think I'm almost sure that we did. I can go look it up or send us an email over to guides and we can point you to the right video that was done in a Wednesday webinar session. And I think that that's it. So let me go ahead and tackle some of the questions that I got this week, which I think that you might find interesting. The first one was someone was building a list control, and in the list control, they have a social security number field. So here's my list control. I've already built it out. And in my list control, I have a social security number field. In fact, that's all I have for simplicity's sake. I'm just using static data. Here's the field name, SSN. And here's the value, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. For those of you outside the US are sort of curious, this is the actual format that you typically see social security numbers in, not with equal signs, but with dashes. So it's usually 3 digits, a hyphen, 2 digits, a hyphen, and 4 digits. But in this case, the database is set up so it doesn't have the hyphens in the correct place. That's not really a big problem. I mean, no information is lost per se, but you might want to be able to take a look at when you're displaying it on the screen, you might get human readable by putting in the dashes where they normally are. This is pretty similar to formatting a telephone number and a few other things as well. So the question is, how do I do this? How do I make it so that my social security numbers are formatted with the proper dashes in place? Well, I will tell you. When you place the social security number into your list layout, and I'll pop over here to list layout, one of the options is when you select that field, something that is called a template. And if you click on the template, you can put any HTML here in that you want. If you just do, by default, what will be here is something that looks like this. Just say SSN, just like that. I'll click OK. Let's just take a quick preview of the list. And what we should see is SSN, and there's the data. Okay, so we haven't added any real formatting to it. This bracket just simply means please insert that field value. Now, Alpha has an ability to format data before it's displayed on the screen, and it does that using something called format directives. So to do that, I'm going to go down here to Insert Format Directive, and we're going to see a little menu pop up. Now we have some predefined directives that you could use. So if this was a number, for example, not a social security number, but like a number that was holding a numeric value, I could click on that. And here are all these different string possibilities that I could use. So if I wanted to have it look like this with commas, or this with decimals, or this, any of these, or round it, or any of those things here. So if you see, this is my number in, this is my number out. This is one for a telephone number, for example. But I don't think we have one for a social security number. In fact, I know that we don't. So I'm going to show you what you would do if you can't find the format directive that you want. What instead you're going to do is you're going to go into custom, and you're going to create a custom format. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK on that. And I've opened up the user-defined format directives. Now, it's important to note that these format directives don't just apply to this one list control or even to this one UX. They apply to the whole web project. So, in fact, I'm going to cancel out of here. I'm going to show you where you can find those because you'll end up using them probably in multiple components, which is why we've decided to decentralize them. So up here under Web Projects, I'm going to go to the Web Projects control panel, and I'm going to go into Project Properties. And then I'm going to pop down to, just going to type in Format, so Template Format Directives. And when I click here, you'll see it's the exact same dialog box I saw a second ago with SSN. Okay, so how do you build a format directive? Well, you build it in JavaScript. So I've written a little bit here. And basically, this is the key line that we're going to be taking a look at. When you get data in other words, the data that you're going to format is going to be kept in something called V. So that's basically the text. But V can have a method with it called Substring. What Substring will do is it'll let you pull that string apart into pieces. So I created a variable here called T1. And I said, take what you've given me, that V1, and using that method, I want you to display the first 3 characters of that string. Now, you're probably looking at this and going, all right, that doesn't look right, Dave. I mean, first of all, why doesn't it start with 1 and go up to 3, you know? Or if you're thinking one thing advanced, oh, I bet it's 0 based. So the first character is really 0. Why doesn't it end at 2? Well, the way Substring works here, and in fact, if you can look at the context sensitive help, is it always needs to be 1 past the substring end. So that was sort of a fun learning experience that now you know as well. So what I did is I took the first 3 digits, I added a hyphen, I took the next 2 digits, see where I started 3 to 5, added a hyphen, and then I took the next 4 digits, and then that's all now stored in T1, and I return that as a value. So I'm going to click OK, because that was all set up correctly. I didn't make any changes. So let's go back into the UX builder, and we're going to go into list layout again, and back into the template. And as you'll see, the template, oops, forgot to erase that. The template, the old template, looked like that. But now we're going to put in a format directive. So I'm going to say insert format directive, and the one I'm going to insert is the one that I created, the SSN one. I'll do that, and all it does is put :SSN in. You can type that in yourself too if you forget how it works. I tend to use this so that I don't have to remember the syntax. Okay, so that's there. Now I click OK. Now let's take a look and preview the list. Now let's go ahead and maybe that doesn't work here. Let me click OK, and let's take a look at, I don't know, live preview. And it does in fact work. It looks like it doesn't work in preview. You're gonna have to, it doesn't work in the list preview. You're gonna have to do a live preview. Let's see about working preview. Does that work too? I bet it will. It will, great. But you'll see here it is formatted the way that I want it. So that's the thing about format directives. You can use them for all kinds of things. And you just need to know a little bit of JavaScript on how to put it together. So hopefully that answered that question. The next question we had was from last week, and it had to do with the new security system. So no, I don't need to save that. The new security system. So let's open up the login component here. And in the login component, this is one of the login components that's created for you when you set up security. One of the options that you have in security is to allow for a link called forgot password. And that's that link that you're commonly used to seeing where if you've forgotten your password, you click on the link and asks you for an email address, and then it sends you off to your email a link that you can click on, and it'll bring you back to the site and you can reset your email address. And the fact that you can get into your email is confirmation that it's yours. When you get that email by default, it's going to come from an email address called noreply@alphasoftware.com. And the reason is because built in, we are allowing you to use our mailing account, our Spark Post account to do that. However, you don't have to use ours. You may instead choose to use yours, which means that you can use your domain name along with that. So it could say noreply@yourbusiness.com. So the question is, where do I get to that setting? And it is a little bit hidden, so I'm going to show you how you do that right now. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do a search for, I think it's login. Yeah, it's the login section. Actually, I want to go down into the login section. I'm going to go down to the login section here in properties. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go down to additional features and settings. So choose that. And then with an additional features and settings, it's set right here under email account. So this is it. There's some help text down here to explain how you do it, but I just wanted to let you know how you can find it. If you need to use a different emailer, so basically the UX component that you're going to use for login, you're going to want to go into its properties, go to its login properties, choose additional features and settings, and then go down here to email account, and you'll have to supply some other information here as well. There's also quite a few other things that you can change while you're here. You can change the wording that you like. You can do all kinds of things, what should be in the messages and so on. So this is worth taking a look at once you have it set up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. And I think we had one more question. And we did. Go ahead and close that. And our question today was on debugging a web application. So I've actually built out a component for that called XBasic button. And while I'm here, oops, that's a page, not a component. Where's my XBasic button? Run XBasic button. Here we go. Okay, while I'm here, it would also be a good time to do a quick, just a quick overview as to what we mean by running XBasic in a web or mobile application. So when an application is being run, it's actually being run in a browser, and browsers don't know anything about XBasic. The only thing they know how to do is run JavaScript. So if you want to run some XBasic script, which is a good thing to do, it lets you connect to databases, it lets you connect to APIs, it can do all kinds of things that JavaScript by itself can't do. What you're going to do is do what's called an Ajax callback. So an Ajax callback is a bit of JavaScript that makes a HTTPS request as if it were a browser going back to the server, passes it some information, and then gets a piece of JavaScript back for it to run. If I wanted to create my own JavaScript action, Ajax callback, I could do that here simply by, say, adding control. I'm just going to add a new button, and I'm going to call it a test. All right. So there's my test button. By double clicking on it, I can now tell it I now have access to what's called action JavaScript. And one of the JavaScript actions that I have, of which there are quite a few, is to do an Ajax callback. So I'm going to choose Ajax callback here. And then it's going to ask me a couple of things. What is the callback type? I want it to call an internal function. In other words, a function that I use right now and is built into the component. And I'm going to call that function, let's be original, we'll call it test. Okay. So when I press this button, it's going to go look for on my server, it's going to go look for a function called test, and it's going to run it, and whatever test gives back, it's going to display on the screen. So this is, to do that, you need to know a little bit about how to write an XBasic function that works in an Ajax callback. And here we've given you a huge head start, because we can allow you to create the function prototype. So basically, you come down here to this link, and it shows you all kinds of things that you can do. The key thing is, though, at the very end, is that it's going to want you to return a value. And here's some examples. Let's see, is there an example here? There are a bunch of examples. Yeah, here it is. Return the JavaScript code. Anyway, this is worth running through. I've already created one of these functions. So once you have this set up, basically what you do is you'd copy that to the clipboard, and then you'd go and take a look at the XBasic function declarations. I already have one in here, which I pasted in earlier, called my button. The bottom of my button is, I kept all the comments, but you can choose to copy without the comments. I just put in a couple of declarations. I said x equals 1, y equals 2. And I said, and now that so this is like a sample of in other words, just do something in XBasic. And then I set my button, which is the return value, equal to alert done. And this is JavaScript. So what happens is, when you push the button, it's going to make a call to this function. It's going to get this back. It's going to execute that JavaScript, and I should see a button which says done. So let me click OK. OK again. That's fine. I don't need that. No. In fact, I'm going to remove this button because I don't need it. And we'll do a working preview. So I've clicked run a script, and it gave me back that piece of JavaScript which said done, just as I expected it to. Now, the question is, can I debug into this? And the answer is you can. So you can debug into your XBasic script the way you do any other XBasic script by running a putting a debug function in at the beginning of it. So let's go ahead and take a look at my XBasic functions. And whoops, down here. And we're going to put in a debug one, and uncomment out debug one. Click save. And if I do a live preview, you'll see that our debugger command works as you would expect. I'm going to click run script. My debugger popped open. It showed me what it's about to do. It's about to first do this. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to step through and function, and then step, and then I don't know what we're doing here, but and it keeps going. And the thing runs as expected. However, if you decide to do, instead of working here in the pane, if you decided to do a live test here in the Web Projects control panel, you don't have that functionality, or you used to not have that functionality. So if I click live test, for example, it's going to do the same thing, except it's going to open it in a browser. Again, I've selected XBasic button. And so it should open up my default browser. And I'm going to click, there's my browser. I'm going to click run a script. And it says done. But you'll notice nothing happened here. Nothing popped up. I didn't see any debugger. So if you want to debug in live test, which is kind of more of a more fair running environment, you can do it, but it's a special debug statement, and it's really similar to the other one. So I'm going to go ahead and make that edit right now. Go back into design. And I'm going to insert, instead of debug one, I'm going to say underbar debug one. Save that. Go back to the Web Projects control panel. Now go into live test. Again, that same page we're going to run. And I'm going to choose run a script. And voila, the XBasic debugger has appeared. So even though I'm using a separate browser window, I'm still able to debug here against it using the debugger. All right, let's see what we've got here for other questions. How difficult is it to add security to an already created UX? It's not particularly difficult once you check that option. However, if you want to use, there are a couple ways about it. I mean, okay, so all of the, I guess the question is, do you want to add a login to an existing UX? Or do you just want to have security running with a UX? And actually, if you could email in that question, I could give a more elaborate answer next time we're here. Someone asked, can we, to ever do a video on replacing the tabbed UI? We went over that one. We'll get you the answer. Just send us a question to guides and we'll point you in the right direction. Oh, can someone post the social security? Can I post the social security format template? Yes, I absolutely can. So let me go ahead and do that. Project properties, format directives, format directive. I'll give you the whole thing. Control C. And I'm going to put this here in the chat window. Send. Okay, there it is. All right, I think that looks like it. Oh, yeah. Someone pointed out correctly at the top, var text equals quote, quote. Yeah, that's garbage. I don't need that. So yeah, it'll work without it. Thanks very much. Sharp eye there. You really just need these two lines to make that work. Is there an official or unofficial place people can swap or sell components? I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that on the message board. We certainly don't prohibit that sort of thing. If there are enough people interested in doing it, we could consider doing another a breakout forum. But that's absolutely a fine place to, if you want to advertise something you have, put there, or if you want to ask someone if they have a component you want to use, feel free. Oh, wait a minute. Someone else has pointed out an answer with 2 exclamation points so that you know that's a good answer. And that is go to IADN. That's actually not a bad idea. Go to the Independent Alpha Developers Network. Glenn, if you're here, can you send me the URLs? It's simply iadn.net. I've forgotten what the URL was. All right, very good. And then it looks like we're interested in a new session on alpha launch. I think that's a great idea. We can have Chris go back through similar to what he did at the conference, but I think that's a good one. So back to where do you find IADN information? You find it at iadn.com. It was as simple as I thought. So I just wanted to make sure before I sent you to the wrong place. Cool. Well, that looks like it for new questions. Slightly shorter webinar this week. We will be back next week where Dion McCormick will be continuing his Task Manager application. Until then, keep those questions coming to guides@alphasoftware.com, and do check out IADN. They also do a webinar on Fridays. Until then, take care and stay well. See you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.